Greetings, Discrete Defenders. Today, as per viewer request, I'm going to show you how I make my homemade ballistic gel test blocks. First of all, I like to use the cheapest brand available. In this case, it's the Walmart Great Value unflavored gelatin. Mainly because I've found that they work as well as higher priced gelatins. I generally use the soft tap water at my house because I've found that that works well enough. In this case, we're going to be using distilled water. The recipe I have calls for exactly 162 ounces of water and 18 ounces of the unflavored gelatin for a total of 180 ounces that will be 10% gelatin. So 162 ounces of water, 18 ounces of unflavored gelatin, 180 ounces total. That's 10%. All right. The water is pretty simple. A gallon is 128 ounces. Just go ahead and dump that into our 8-quart kettle. Probably going to be a lot of cuts in this video because it's a very time-consuming process. So the one-take purity will be compromised as per usual. These are little half-liter bottles, 16.9 ounces. We get close enough to 162 ounces because the two of these together are 33.8, 34 and 128. You get the idea, it's almost 162. I like the recipe to be a little bit over 10% gelatin. Now, the key to getting the gelatin correctly weighed is to remember what your container weighs at the start. In this case, it's 3.77 ounces. We can hit the tare button and drop that down to 0, but that kind of wastes the battery. I'd rather just go 3.77 and remember that it's 3.77 and subtract that from the total. Now, this is the really time-consuming part. These unflavored gelatins come in an 8-ounce box. I find that they generally have just a little over 8 ounces, or at least the Great Value brand does, which is helpful, but it also means I kind of have to weigh them as I go, and each bag is about 1/4 of an ounce. I can do 2, maybe 3 at a time. 3 takes a little bit extra time to make sure I get all the gelatin, all the gel out. However you do it, it's going to take some time. So I'll pause the video while I do all that. So now I have 18 ounces of gelatin in there for a grand total of a bit less than 22 ounces. Remember the container was 3.77 when we started. And now I will gently whisk that gelatin into the water so as not to create too much froth or foam. Maybe I'll do this left-handed here so you can sort of see my technique and spread it around. Don't want to raise a lot of bubbles in this process, but you don't want to make a big clump of gelatin either, because what we're going to do next is we're going to bloom this gelatin once it's all mixed with the water. And the blooming process takes several hours in a refrigerator. If I start with my 45-degree tap water, it takes considerably less time. The bloom actually starts to set in a matter of minutes. The bloom process is actually optional, depending on what you want to use the gel for. If you're going to make videos with it, I recommend the bloom process. It doesn't really change the character of the gelatin at all, except to make it a clearer block. Mostly what my channel is about is just showing people what I've learned, what I've picked up over the years, or the results of applying what I've studied to small caliber firearms. Now that's ready to go in the fridge. You're going to need a space in the refrigerator for it, but I won't subject you to 3 hours of staring at my refrigerator door. Alright, now there's been 3 hours, the bloom is set up. You can kind of see the texture of it. It's not quite a gel block, but it's no longer a liquid. So what we need to do before we pour it into the molds is melt it. And to do that, we have to start in hot water, because if we put it directly onto the stove, it will scorch instead of melting. This process takes a long time, but as it melts around the edges, you can slowly start to mix it together to speed the melting process. Now I start out with tap water, as hot as I can get it. You want to be careful not to get any water inside the bloom. But you can take and heat some up in the microwave. Or however you do, on the stove is fine. And add the heated water to the water in the sink to speed the melting process. Now you don't want to go too far above about 130 degrees Fahrenheit, because at about 140 degrees Fahrenheit you start to change the character of the gel, or so I've read. Alright, we'll let that melt for a while, and then we'll move to the stove. And we're back. Alright, the bloom now has taken on a much more liquid character. In a minute, we will move it to the stove, because this is now something we can stir while it heats evenly. Alright. Now, we want to keep the heat kind of low, because we want to be careful to avoid scorching the gel. Again, it should not go above 140 Fahrenheit based on my research, or the character of the gel will begin to change. I've heard 130 is the goal, so we'll heat this to a temperature of about 130 degrees Fahrenheit always, since I'm in America. 50 degrees Celsius is 122 degrees Fahrenheit. So 54, 55, and heat it to about 55 degrees centigrade. And to check on that, we have a candy thermometer. Just going to drop this in here. Okay, so the temperature right now is in the 90s Fahrenheit. And at room temperature, the gel will be a solid. So you can tell this is just barely melted. Once again, this process is going to take a while. You do want to stir it. Maybe not. It doesn't need to be stirred continuously. But the gel will, it's a thick liquid at this temperature. And so there's, in my opinion, there's still some danger of scorching. As it heats, it will begin to clarify, and you can kind of see that if I can move some of the foam out of the way. Yeah, quite a bit of foam on the surface. And it'll lose that cloudy appearance that the bloom has. We're back. The gel is a little bit cooler now. So we will pour it into the molds. And you can tell how much clearer that is now. Although what I should probably do at some point is make a comparison showing the relative clarity of an unbloomed block, because you can just go straight to heating it. Try to get these guys even. And these are 2.4 liter containers. We start out with 4.8 liters of water. So you can see just how little volume the gel actually adds. These are relatively small molds, just about 8.5 inches through the centers. They'll make a total of a 17-inch gel column, and they're adequate probably for 380s, maybe 38 special, depending on what you're shooting. I like to use them for 22 Magnum. For anything bigger, like a service caliber pistol, you'll definitely want a bigger gel block, a wider, heavier gel block. Now you let these cool, maybe overnight, and then stick them in the fridge, because the closer they are to 32 degrees Fahrenheit, the closer they will perform to FBI specifications. All right. Thanks, folks. That is how I make my ballistic gel test blocks. Have a great week.